Thank you for that nice introduction, Pamela. And thank you, Studio School, for inviting me to talk about my work just before my show, introducing me to the student body here who've taken a chance and come to the lecture. Thank you so much for coming. And I look out here and I see people who have meant the most to me as an artist, as my community, which I've really needed, being a support, and maybe more importantly, tough advice. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to begin by showing early work and then come up to the present time. Some of the pieces that will be in my Edward Thorp show. Opening April 19th. These two paintings were in my first one-person show in New York, which was in 1989 at Victoria Monroe Gallery. And I started out as an abstract painter, not a purely abstract painter. I thought of myself as a mark maker. And I'm showing you these two because I feel, in a way, I'm still doing these paintings. The one on the right I called Night Sky, and I still do a lot of starry skies. And the one on the left has marks that could be something else. Letters, little beds, hurdles to jump over to get in the painting. Another painting from that period, as you can see, resembles an unnameable thing. Now I'm going back to the 70s. I started painting. I was living in Maine, and this was my wood pile. Those were the years when I just felt I didn't have enough time to paint, and I didn't have enough money and space and so on. And I remember making this wood pile one day, and I was so frustrated that I wasn't being an artist that I went into the room where my painting stretchers were, and I shoved two of them into this wood pile. There's a one behind this one. And I put that little birch log under it because I wanted so badly to make art. So what the lesson of this is that you can, maybe, no matter what you're doing. This was my studio in Brunswick, Maine, and I was doing works on paper on the wall, kind of shapes lined up, and I couldn't stand that anymore. So I took all my painting supplies and put them in rows on the floor, physically lining them up. I still line things up. It's an impulse. After I did that, it was very unsatisfying, so I took all my paint supplies and I moved them to the side of the room, kind of outlining the room. And I discovered for the first time that I wasn't painting in a rectangle, that the room had a kind of wedge shape in it. So I called this my wedge piece. This is a picture of the Union of Maine Visual Artists. That's me in the middle behind the dog. I still belong to the Union of Maine Visual Artists. It's still going strong. We had our own shows. We had our own newspaper. And we had lots of meetings and slideshows. Now, is that funny? And I'm in touch with most of these people. Then I moved to New York City in the 80s, and added a lot of color to my work. I still kept it very basic. This was done on a piece of shaped wood, and I called it Beard. It's always been very hard for me to do big paintings. This is one of the few early big paintings that I did. This painting I did for a friend's birthday present. And it was important to me because I realized that I could put content into my paintings and still perhaps remain true to my mark-making vocabulary. My studio is in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and I live in Manhattan. And every day I would pass this sign on the way to the subway. And I felt this guy was kind of talking to me, because during that time in Williamsburg, the paintings that were shown in the galleries there were very crisp. They didn't have schmears. And this guy every morning was saying, "May I suggest you have that with a schmear?" And it was really helpful. Because it was very hard to be part of that community and realize that the galleries were not going to show the kind of work I was doing, which was very gestural, with a lot of hand, painterly, as they say. And those of us who were doing that kind of work would say, well, this can't last forever. This was another idea that meant a lot to me. These surgeons are saying, let's just start cutting and see what happens. And I realized that the humor of this comes from the fact that the surgeons are supposed to know what they're doing before they start cutting. And I always felt embarrassed that I would say that I would start the painting and then see what happens. So I love this cartoon. After a while, I started experimenting with the paint itself, making it very liquid and pooling it on the surface. This I called Islands. This painting, I got a certain light in it, what I called to myself a kind of TV light. It was a light coming from behind, almost like a Rothko. And that was a revelation to me that the painting itself could have an inner light. It could not be about the depiction of how light is reflected on a surface, but it actually could be the paint itself throwing off some light. An early work on paper where I inadvertently made deep space looking almost like a theater. Someone said that maybe this was like the air of text messages with letters passing around through the top. You notice the white dots again. And I think the theme of theater is continued in my work. This one, maybe the bottom part looked both like theater seats and like the sea. So I realized I could go in two directions at once, in a way. This is a painting by Morrison Hartley. Anyone painting in the state of Maine knew a lot about Marsden Hartley, who was born in Maine and left to be a world citizen, but then returned to Maine and did a lot of important paintings. This, in fact, is a Maine painting. This is Marsden Hartley's depiction of Lobsterman holding the dead Christ. And I admired it because it was so strange and so honest and so moving. And also the way he did the figures were almost like folk art, and he would repeat his motif. There was sort of a patterning, and the dead Christ was just odd. And I think I realized that maybe I wanted to bring into my work more of what Morrison Hartley had, which was an emotive quality. So one day I was painting in my studio, and as one of my painting teachers said, I was pushing the paint around. Nothing was happening. So I went inside and I got a comic book from the 50s, which I had, and it had the story of a bride, and one of the pages showed her fixing up her new bridal home. And I projected that image on this. She was painting her new living room or something. And the image interested me because here she was kind of posing as a painter, and she didn't look right at all. She had the wrong tools, and she had the wrong outfit. And I totally related to her. She was aspiring to something she wasn't. So I had this painting up, and people came into my studio and they did something that they'd never done before when they looked at my work. They laughed. And I realized that I could bring humor into my work, although it took me a while to do that. And I didn't really follow through on this. Actually, a curator came in and said I was critiquing popular culture with this painting, and I knew I didn't want to do that, so I destroyed it. But I tried to do other figurative paintings while still being me. So I thought the way to bring figures in was probably by making outlines, the way Carol Dunham did, or Donald Batchelor. This is a woman flying with a cape on. I thought she was like the painter woman. I thought she was aspiring to something that she wasn't quite achieving, which was flying. I tried another flyer, and it turned into a swimmer. This is the swimmer painting. I think this is 1999. And a painting of a chest of drawers, unlike Donald Judd's. What is that called? Stack. These are all messy. This is kind of domestic. Matisse. I thought, well, Matisse did the figure. He did outlines, and he did figures in water. He made the background become the water. He had a terrific balance of person and space around the person. I thought that would be the way to go. But it wasn't the way to go for me. I realized after a while that if I could just make the mark be the figure, the one stroke for the arm, one circle for the head, make it very reductive. This is a very small painting. I can see looking at it that I was influenced by Alex Katz, the way he simplified his figures. In fact, I was very familiar with his collages. This is a collage by Alex Katz. It's small. I would go back to Maine in the summer, and see a lot of his work because he summers in Maine. This was made by gluing solid pieces of colored paper onto a ground. And I think it was the precursor to his very big simplified works. But I saw a lot in it that I wanted. So eventually I made groups of figures. This is men in dark suits. They were originally sitting around a table, but the painting got away from me and they look like they're kind of lapping up water. And my friend Meredith Allen at the time said, oh, it's people in suits lapping up all the resources. Swimmers at night. I realized I could have gone back into this and shown their eyes, for instance, but there was something very raw about this, something very elemental about the event of swimming with no clothes on at night. So I left it in this sort of crude state. Maybe it was a little help, too, by Joe Fife writing that he liked this painting in this state. So I looked at it again. Yeah. This is no doubt a nod to Matisse's dance. A group of women holding hands in a circle in the surf. It's a big painting. Some kind of ritual. So you almost pay more attention to the larger composition than actually the small details of the figure. This is called art students throwing their paintings off the bridge. And it's a lot like the bridge in Philadelphia where I teach. So John Yao wrote about this and said, I was there on the bridge jettisoning my work into the river by changing it. And I think that's true. It started out with that brown shape, which I thought at first looked like some kind of animal, but I could see a little white something or other, and I kind of pulled out the story and the figures from what was originally on the canvas and came up with this idea. Now, I think that's important because I didn't set out to make a painting about students throwing their artwork into the water. The story came as I painted the painting. And then I had my swimmers swimming towards Manhattan at night. So it became the story more of survival, a little tougher than leisure time, summer. With these boats, I wanted more color, so I started piling color on the top of the boats and got the idea to make tall, unusually tall, costumed. I don't know who these people are, but they are out in the open ocean at night, coming towards you in black boats, each one with a different hat. So it's about a certain communal ritual, but they're separate. Maybe it's about all that color that I love so much. The sea, which to me has always been very powerful when you see it at night. This is a Robert Wilson photograph. He also did tall people. I think he realized working on the stage, he had to make them take up more room, which is maybe why I made mine elongated too. These are signs that I wrote to myself. Although I moved from Maine to New York, I would go back each summer and I would paint in one of the barn outbuildings next to that house that I lived in. And I knew when I was leaving that I would come back after the winter. And so one time I wrote, "Be ordinary," and another time I wrote, "Be trashy." And what I meant by that was ordinary in a sort of Buddhist sense. Not be boring, but be down to earth, plain spoken. I was trying to remind myself. And the other one, be trashy, was just a private scolding to myself to like not be tasteful and ladylike, that it had no part in contemporary art. And I dared myself to perhaps be vulgar. Now, this painting is not very typical of my work, and I found it when I was looking at images to show you. It's something I kind of did on the side. It's called Teenage Makeover, and it's all the things I had to do as a teenager. Braces, better posture, curl my hair, wear high heels, wear lipstick. And it was in the corner of my studio, and the painter Brendan Katz came in, and I had some other bigger serious works on the wall, but he looked at this painting and he said, "Kathy, I want that painting. I want to take it." And that taught me that I could put some of my own personality and personal stories into my work. This painting began a long series I did of ships. I had a dark painting, and the top was kind of mushy white, and it looked to me like an iceberg. So I thought, iceberg. Well, I'll put an ocean liner. I'll put the Titanic on the bottom. And I called it history painting. And that was so satisfying that I did many more paintings of ocean liners. Probably I made these tipping over because I'd already had the red marks on the paper. This is a work on paper, gouache. But once I made the ocean liners tipping over, I saw that that was poignant in the sense that it was something very big and stately in trouble, disaster, something we considered a pillar of strength was falling over. And this was before 9/11 and before a lot of this economic collapse. But I've thought of this image many times. Little paintings of ocean liners. These are about 5 by 7 inches. A much bigger painting of an ocean liner in a red sea with little sailboats coming towards it. Now this red sea is really the color of, say, a cranberry canvas bag left in the sun. But this digital technology has made it look kind of lurid. A little brighter than it actually is. This painting is I'd say, 80 inches wide. I tried to get a better color, but it actually just shows the same color. I went to Miami for the first time in my life. I grew up in New England, and my family was very... If it was cold outside, the idea was to go skating. You didn't go to Florida. So I'd never seen Florida. I got through my whole life without going to Florida. And one December, I went down to the Miami Basel. And when I got off that plane in December with that balmy air and those bright colors, I loved it. And this is called Pleasure Boat. And it's my Valentine to this lost world of the tropics that I never experienced. Back to New England. This is a ferry boat approaching in the distance. Right, it doesn't really look like a ferry boat. This is what it looks like up close. It's really a series of paint strokes and splats of paint. But the idea is there of something looming on the horizon, something you anticipate, full of stories coming towards you in the icy waters of the North Atlantic. It's a little painting, maybe 20 inches high. This is from Fellini's movie, Amarcord. And when I saw this, I thought, Fellini, in his genius, knew that if you had an ocean liner, you got to put a lot of lights on it. It would look great. So he did. Points of light. Wonderful, wonderful scene. Ocean liner at night. Can't think of anything more beautiful. This is called the Philosopher's Clambake. Well, it started out as a fire and dark-clothed people. What did they look like? Well, they must be philosophers. I knew a lot about clambakes. I didn't know a lot about philosophers. And this is another example of a painting where I would combine two vocabularies and get a certain strangeness. I already had the swimmers in this painting. I didn't like them. They were too clunky. So it sat around for a while. But then I had been doing these galleons, these pirate ships. And once I put a pirate ship, old boat, a sort of substantial boat in this painting, then the relationship between the boat and the swimmers became quite mysterious. Was it their boat? Was the boat going to harm them? I could weave all sorts of stories. And it was almost by accident. another one where I had, I forget which came first, the piano or the horses. A harbor scene, and I spelled out the word welcome with the Statue of Liberty. Another harbor. The color is not quite like this. Did I do that? Did I put that black thing up there? If I don't do anything, it'll go away? Yes. I returned to my flying idea, a figure suspended, buoyant in the air, diving, a rock diver. I was still struggling, but okay, if you're going to put the figure in your painting, how do you keep the painting somewhat flat and abstract? I didn't want to contend with serious problems like perspective and space. I feel I'm a surface painter. I like texture and gesture. I like the paint marks to show. This is called Man Underwater. It's actually very small. And I returned to the theater theme, this time putting a figure on the stage. I think this is about what it feels like to be in the spotlight and feeling kind of vulnerable with an audience looking at you. There's a head in the foreground, so this is about this audience looking down at some kind of pageantry going on in the theater. And the head looked like one of those theater masks, the happy and sad mask, so I left it that way. I did this the summer that I spent at Skowhegan as a resident faculty, and there was so much going on there. So many young artists doing things like making objects and making videos that I was very inspired to try and take some of my images, and I went to the wood shop and made this little boat coming out of the wall. Ocean liner and soft iceberg. This yellow mattress was in front of my studio, and it just was so inviting that I went out and painted an ocean liner on it. A wheelbarrow that was lying around. See, on the right are two paintings that I had already done of pancakes. And I took that imagery and painted it on the bottom of this wheelbarrow. This was in the summer. When I got back to New York, there was a construction fence on my block in Williamsburg. It was blue and black, and I looked at it for a while and I thought, oh boy, if I just came out here. So one Sunday morning I brought my white acrylic paint out and took a deep breath and did the biggest painting I've ever done. And I really think in my whole career as an artist, this is the most fun I've ever had. It was a little scary. And I enjoyed walking past it for about a week, and then I noticed that the construction company, I guess, had needed to move something in the space. So they took down the fence. They didn't even know there was a painting on it. And they put the fence back up again. So my friend Carol Saff said that unknowingly they had ventured into postmodernism. And that I should be grateful. And a friend of mine sent me this image when it was my birthday. Sent me on Facebook. The fun that we can have with Facebook. This is a little, the top part is a mushroom and a little ocean liner. Sculptures made out of cardboard, plaster, and paint. This is a piano jutting out of the wall. So there's no keyboard, kind of Robert Gober style, coming out towards you. And the top seemed too blank, so I put a little Titanic and Iceberg on the top. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is a video I made of the story of the Titanic. I took these small objects and handmade objects and used them to tell the story of the Titanic. So what you're going to see is a 7-second clip showing the climactic scene. I made it one snowy day in front of my studio. Now, see, there is a lot of humor involved, even though it was a disaster. But I think what we're laughing at is me telling the story in the way I did, in the process I used to do that, which is okay. And when I was on the sidewalk making this guy came along and started laughing, and I knew I was on the right track. The swimmers diving in the air, if I put red boots on them and blue pants and red underpants, they turned into Supermen, which is just what I wanted. I wanted a figure flying through the air effortlessly. Then I had to go on the internet and look up Superman. I didn't know much about Superman. I wasn't a teenager that drew comics. And what I liked about Superman was that he flew and that he was red and blue. So this is a large painting with. Instead of making Superman monumental like the ocean liners, I just couldn't pull that off. So I worked a long time on this ground. There are lots of edits in it. and then I slowly let the figures become part of the overall texture of the painting. Multi-Supermen flying. A kind of Rothko-like ground. That's the drop cloths in my studio. And then I painted the outlines of 3 ocean liners coming towards you, very schematically. And the second most fun I've ever had being an artist is making this artist book, which I recently made for my upcoming show. I had grant money, and I thought, I'm going to do this thing that I've always wanted to do, which is put together a book of artwork plus the collection of images that I think we all surround ourselves with. So I put this in the book. This was sent to me by Sue Post. I guess she found it on the internet. It's the Italian cruise ship that ran into trouble and listed over on its side. In fact, I had a number of friends send me pictures of this. And I appreciated that. And it is a strange sight. And this is the wood stove in Maine. I had a curator come over, actually, and this was the only thing she really thought was interesting. This is a picture of me in my studio maybe 15 years ago. What was I thinking? So I've always liked the red capes, not quite knowing what to do with them. I thought that saber, but that is a Luke Skywalker saber sword. I guess I think of the artist as somewhat of as a wizard. So I set up the camera and took these pictures. And now I'm actually doing work that seems relevant to this. But I put this picture in the catalog in lieu of an essay. I thought that this kind of image tells the story of maybe where I was coming from. And these 2 people dressing up. This guy on the left I saw on Halloween in Brooklyn, and the guy on the right, he is dressing up in red. I don't know why, but I think I wanted the 2 images side by side. A work on paper of a Superman figure. There's some collage elements in this. And I put it next to, when you look through after a while, after you've been working for a while, you have lots and lots of pictures, and I found this picture, and I thought, why did I do that? But anyway, I wanted to give it a page. There was the cape or something. This is called Free Fall. This is gouache on paper. This one is a little different than the others because I started with raw canvas that already had marks on it, and I had to get the Superman figure down quickly. And there already was a kind of white paint area in the middle, which I let be Superman's underpants. So this is called Clear Underpants. Started out as a Superman cape, took out the Superman, and put in a ship. Now, the color in this is very distorted, but I recently tried making paintings of big hulls of ships, kind of smoldering, that's Craig Olson's word, in the water. Somewhat seaworthy, somewhat festive, somewhat grand. The bottom of this painting is Dayglow yellow and Dayglow green. These are all current paintings that may or may not be in my show. It's about 60 inches high. I put the paint on with my hands. I was using a kind of paint that is fluorescent but isn't very strong. So it's Dayglow yellow and Dayglow green, but the projector is giving you kind of Martian colors. Kind of a snow globe, summer, firefly, glow in the dark image. So now we're right up to present time. I have one more slide. I just showed this painting in a group show. It says, I wrote in the middle, New Men. And it was a great experience to show this painting because I got so many interesting conversations about what it might mean. At first, people interpreted the New Men as a formal, reflective palindrome. Again, a word I got from Craig Olson. But as I stood at the opening and talked with more and more people, I realized that, yes, I did initially put those words in the center of the painting because they were almost an abstraction. But actually, I felt that there are new men, perhaps related to the Superman theme. But as I looked around the room at this opening, which was on Saturday, I felt I did want to celebrate a generation of young males that I know through the art world that seem like an advanced model on what I knew. And it took me a while to come to that. And this is my last slide. This is Superman at home. So I had to invent his decor, and he's kind of off duty. This is 80 inches high, and I think it'll be in my upcoming show. Thank you all very much.